So good morning, good afternoon, whenever you're choosing to watch this. My name is Maria Aiese. I'm the training director here at HeartShare St. Vincent's. Welcome if you're new to the agency. Good to see you, I guess, if you have been here for a while. Justine, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Justine Brown. I am the program director of the Family Treatment and Rehabilitation, or the FTR Preventive Program at HeartShare St. Vincent's.
Awesome. So we're going to spend some time today talking about the Family Assessment Service Plan, or the FASP. So what I'm going to do real quick is share my presentation so everyone's able to see it. So today we're doing a FASP training, and this is specific to the prevention program. So best practice in all fields of social work for clients is to have a plan, for clients to have a plan to achieve desired goals. We are a helping profession, so we're here to support families to achieve their goals. We help families identify what those goals are going to be, with a little bit of influence from ACS to see what is really putting this family at risk. We assess families using engagement, motivational interviewing, and we follow up with collateral providers to see progress that a family is making. The way we document all of this is primarily through our progress notes, all culminating in the FASP. So if you think of your progress notes as you're writing a book, the FASP is going to be like your book report. This is a didactic training, so you're going to be getting a lot of information from me and Justine today. Once you complete the video, you can reach out and you'll get a quiz. This is, all anything that's in the quiz we will have said in the training, so there's not going to be any, no surprises, I should say. There's no expectation that you're going to be a FASP expert at the end of this video. There's, you have supervisors, you have great directors to hold your hand through the process. We also offer live Zoom FASP trainings each month. Additionally, if you look in the comment section of this video, there's going to be links to additional resources. So like a really robust FASP guide, a FASP at a glance cheat sheet that we developed. So you have people in your corner to, supports in your corner to help you through this. It's going to be a lot. So if you're feeling overwhelmed at any point / at the end of this, that's totally normal. It's a lot of information going into this report. Additionally, you're going to see timestamps at the bottom in the comments, I should say. So the FASP is divided up into different sections, and all the different sections, you'll see where you can fast forward through this video to get to that area. So if you're having trouble with, for example, the case update, we'll talk about what that is. You can just fast forward to X time and you'll see that in the comments section. So it's all really laid out for you. Like I said, it's going to be a lot of information. Believe me, I struggled when I first started writing and reviewing FASPs. Definitely struggled with this, but you will get there. Be patient with yourself. You have people who are going to be patient with you. Okay, so let's get started. So at this point, you may have seen the system Connections. You may not have seen it. But Connections is the main database where all child welfare documentation lives in New York State. So your progress notes are going to be in the system called Connections. And the Family Assessment Service Plan, or service plans that we write, the FASP, also lives in Connections, mostly. We'll talk about what the nuances of that in a little bit. It's an intranet, which means it's a secure network where you share information. ACS will have access to Connections, your supervisor has access to it, your director, and of course you will have access to your families that will be documented in Connections. Okay, so before we even get into what the FASP, the Family Assessment Service Plan, before we even get into what that is, it's really important that we talk about the Family Team Conference. And Justine, please feel free to interrupt me at any point. I feel like I'm chatting a lot here. Let's talk about the Family Team Conference. So it would be unfair to families if we created all these goals, this whole service plan for them without having their input, because we believe that families are experts on their lives. So it's imperative that we involve them in every step of the way in the planning process. You're going to hear a lot of acronyms today, but we'll spell them all out for you before we just continue to use them. So the Family Team Conference FTC. So a lot of the planning that you do with families is going to happen at home and office visits. FTC is a really great opportunity for you, the family, whoever they might consider a support in their life, perhaps your supervisor, to come to the table and say, okay, here's how everything is going. Here's what we need to do to move everyone forward here and eventually go our separate ways. So let's talk a little bit about the FTC a little bit more. So the FTC must take place prior to submitting a service plan, right? Just because, to reiterate, we're not making plans for families without involving them. I can think about how I would feel if I were a client and my worker came to me and said, okay, well, Marie, you got to do X, Y, Z to get, to get us out of your lives and blah, 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 blah. But I really haven't had a voice or a choice what any of those things are. So strengths are always discussed first. If Mr. Smith is, we'll assume that's the father in this family, or the caregiver, he's attending therapy consistently, his housing is stable, all's looking good there. Then we talk about concerns. So if a child has a developmental disability and no services are in place. Mrs. Smith, another caregiver, has a mental illness and refuses to address it with therapy or medication. Every program has at least one FTC facilitator. This facilitator is the person who guides you through the meeting, keeps things moving along. So that person will take notes and collaborate with everyone there to develop a service plan and an action plan. This is what's going to inform the service plan that you write. We're not going to put anything into our written service plan that we haven't discussed in this meeting. I'm so used to saying any questions so far, but this is just going into the universe. Everyone should be given a copy of the action plan so all parties are on the same page. Some families choose to not take it, that's fine. We're always at least offering a copy of it. Justine, anything I'm missing so far about the FTC?
I would just say this is a great opportunity when you're meeting with a family to reiterate the consensus. If we're thinking about weaving in SBC, which all the programs are using, your supervisor or the facilitator is really going to bring some of those individual and family level issues, and that's what we're going to be making the plan around.
Great. So we've talked about the FTC, the importance of planning before we start documenting. So now that we have that, what is the FASP? So think of yourself as an author. I kind of made this analogy before, but if your progress notes are equivalent to the book that you're writing as an author, the FASP is the book report. You're not going to sit here and regurgitate all your notes into a service plan. You're summarizing the work that you've done with this family and how you're going to move forward. It's the primary tool for documentation of all information and casework activity for child welfare services in New York State. It's designed to support a family-focused approach. So we're not just looking at mom, we're not just looking at dad, we're not just looking at child, we're looking at the family as a whole. Think about your family functioning. How is the family functioning as a system, and how are the individual people contributing to the functioning of that system? Okay, so the FASP focuses on some key casework activity outcomes. It focuses on the service plan, not so much on those distractors that we sometimes get caught up on, things like housing, things like, I don't know, like family drama that doesn't rise to the level of safety and risk. It gathers and records information about a family and its functioning. We'll talk a lot about what that information is. It helps us with decision-making and assessing change. When I was a prevention supervisor, I used to say to my case planners, if I look at 4 different service plans, they should have very different information. I should be able to see where the family started, what you have done to get the family where they are now. assist with decision-making. If I'm reading a FASP, a service plan that says no one's doing what they got to do, we haven't reached consensus about anything, the individual issues and the family issues are still of great concern, we can't really in good faith decide that it's safe to close this case. So FASPs should really illustrate the level of safety that a family is having right now at the time of the writing of the service plan. It's an accountability tool as well. So if you're new, those programs get audited. FASPs get read by all different types of reviewers from local, internal bodies. If you're writing a service plan for a family, I should be able to read that service plan, having never met this family, not knowing what they look like, what they sound like, what they smell like, and really be able to get a clear picture of this family's functioning. Okay. So
case initiation dates, right? So when we talk about child welfare, there's always a deadline attached to a document. And with FASPs, the deadline for when things are due are all based to the CID date. This is the case initiation date. This is the date that the case opened with ACS. So a lot of times you'll see a CID and a CRD. The CRD is when we're responsible. The CID is when the case began. And that is how our FAST dates are determined. Yep, so you can find that information, one, in Promise. So when you get the referral, it should be on there. And it will be in Promise. It will also be in Connections. Okay, types of FASPs. So in preventive services, there are a few different types of FASP that we're working with. So if we have a case that is being referred from ACS, they are going to be responsible for the initial FASP, which is due 30 days after the case opens with ACS. So sometimes we won't even have met a family while this FASP is completed. Sometimes we will get a referral the day after an SCR call is made. So it is important to know when those dates are, because you sometimes will be assigned a case planner role as soon as you get a case, and you need to always check if there's a FASP due, because if you have case planning responsibility, the system recognizes you as the one responsible for the FASP. So that initial FASP is due 30 days after the CID. And of course, we always have internal deadlines. So that would be 20 days for the CID. So when are you responsible for an initial FASP, right? We don't really care so much if ACS is involved, but if we have an advocate case or a self-referral, this is a case where we're responsible for that initial FASP at 30 days. If you have an advocate case referred by ACS, because we do get those as well, so if it came from the FAR division, they should be doing that initial FASP, but you need to ask. So after the initial FASP, we have what's called the comprehensive FASP. So that's due to your supervisor 70 days from the CID, and it's due to ACS 90 days. We'll get into like sort of what all that means and why when we talk about submitting a FASP. But the comprehensive FASP, we have a little bit of information about the family. So they're not asking very in-depth questions where we might see in a reassessment, but we should have some understanding of the family here. So when we talk about the initial FASP, I'm just going to go back because Maria talked before about FTCs. In preventive services, we now hold initial conferences, and that is held within 30 to 45 days that a case opens with the agency. So sometimes if ACS is having a follow-up child safety conference or an FTM, that holds the place of that conference. So when we talk about FASP dates tied to FTCs, we're really talking about reassessment. We're talking about what you need to remember in terms of FTCs and FASPs. If it's a reassessment FASP, you always need an FTC. It doesn't matter if it's the third reassessment FASP, you need to have a conference attached to it. And so when we talk about the initial reassessment, it's 6 months from the CID. due to ACS 7 months, and we're having a conference before we submit that FAST to the supervisor. So just something to think about is you might get a case 5 months after it's opened with ACS, and there's a reassessment FAST due, which means you are responsible to hold a conference and to do that FAST. So the reassessment FAST really discusses everything that happened since the last FAST. This is where you're giving yourself credit, you're giving the family credit, you're giving all those service providers that you've been in contact with credit for everything that's happening in that family. A plan amendment. So a plan amendment is, completed a lot of times for our purposes when a preventive case is closing. So when we're closing our case, we need to launch a plan amendment, and we need to really put in the case closing summary there. Or if something happened really significant in between the two FASPs, in between your reassessment and the next reassessment, we launch a plan amendment. And some of those things that could happen is one of the kids that, we service can go in care, or, half the family could move. There are a lot of different things that could happen that would warrant a plan amendment. But most of the times in preventive services, you're launching a plan amendment when the preventive service case is closing.
So before we get started on completing the FAST, there are some things we need to do besides the FTC to, we just need to get some things in order in connection. So we're kind of setting the table here before we sit down for a meal, before we complete the FAST. Go square some things away. One thing that we have to do is the sex trafficking screening. So there's a high correlation between families with child welfare involvement and sex trafficking. So in an attempt to reduce these numbers, every time we complete a service plan, we also must screen sex trafficking. We're not going to get into, there's a ton of training about what those red flags are, but the tool asks you very specific questions that you will answer. You won't be able to even, the system connections won't even allow you to begin a FAST before this is complete.
It won't allow you to launch it.
Yeah, you won't even be able to complete it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, you can start it.
Say it again, go ahead.
No, you can start it. You just can't submit it. There's a fail safe.
Got it, thank you. So the person list window, tracked children detail window. So a lot of the service plan is going to be auto-filled with information that already exists in connections. Therefore, it's in your best interest to make sure this information is correct. You really don't want to be in a position where you have this opportunity to have connections do some of the work for you, to customize your FAST, and not take the time to set the table and make sure all the information being autofilled is correct. So your person list window, as you're doing this, your supervisor will show you where it is, and we'll also share some screenshots in addition to the guide that's linked below. It's a window to where you have your key demographic information for anyone in the home with whom you are planning. This will include caregivers and children. This will also identify the program choice and permanency planning goals for each child who is receiving services. It is really important that this is correct before, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the accuracy of this is really important because things happen. Like Justine said, sometimes we have plan amendments where we have stopped planning with a family member. If we're not planning with a family member anymore, if they have passed away, if they have moved out of the state, if a young person has gone into foster care, they're not going to be included in our service plan. Therefore, we don't want them to be tracked and then auto-populated into the service plan because it's not an accurate service plan at that point. So this is what it looks like. It's obviously a little blurry here. It'll be much clearer when you pull it up in connections because this is a screenshot. It looks a little blurrier. So just as a reminder, we haven't even gotten to the service plan yet. We're still setting the table to make sure everything is copacetic in terms of how we're going to move through the plan. At the top of this graphic, it's going to show you these are the people. You see Christy, Kimberly, Patrick, Thomas, and Tyler. We're going to go ahead and assume that the person completing this FASP has, removed whoever is not there, should not be there, hasn't included anyone who should be there, and all your demographic information over here. You see their date of birth, so we can assume that Christy and Thomas, who were born in 84 and 75, are the caregivers, and they have 3 children. So we really want to be making sure that all of this is accurate, because this is what's going to populate your service plan. Uh-oh, moved too quickly there.
So yeah, I think you covered that.
The track children, okay. Do you want to talk about program choice?
Yeah, I have that somewhere else too, so I'm getting a little confused. But so the program choice here, what's really important in prevention is if it says, it's going to say, so we're not going to see placement so much unless a child is in care. We're going to see prevent placement or prevent replacements. So, here, this is just an example of what this screen would look like. So when, sometimes when we get a case, we're looking at the program choice before we're launching the FASP, because we can't change it once we launch it. So we want to make sure that it's correct, and we want to make sure that it's accurate. So if we have a young person that was in care and is now returned, we want to make sure that's indicated there. And if we have a young person who, has never been in care, but it says that that the young person is in care, we need to make sure that's accurate, because it populates areas of the FASP that you will not be able to complete. And a lot of times that's checked by the supervisor in preventive services. So when we get a case, a lot of times we check in on program choice and program eligibility. Adults that should be listed. So when we talk about adults that should be listed, we're really talking about all the adults in the home, or that care for the children in some capacity, right? So who lives in the home, who are the parent or caretaker spouse, who are the legal parents who may or may not actually be in the home. A lot of times we get so many adults because a case might be open with ACEs for a very long time. And we might want to talk to our supervisor or director about removing people if they're not in that child's life anymore and not relevant, because we can't comment about them. But if we have someone who, it might be incarcerated, we're leaving them there because that parent, is still an active member. Hopefully there's some visitation, but they're impacting, and we're going to use their information in the FASP. And we're always going to add a comment on how that child relates to that adult or caretaker. Super important. I'm smiling because I'm sure you've already heard this, whether it's your first day or first 5 minutes, you want to document everything. Also adults or siblings. If we have an 18 or 19-year-old who's in the home, and might be that young person's sibling, they still could be a caretaker and having a huge responsibility and impact on that young person's life. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to document that.
Any adult in the home, this is the main takeaway here. Any adult in the home who might have some kind of caring responsibility for the child. That's the answer to that question. So in connections, there's going to be a primary caretaker and a secondary caretaker. This is pretty self-explanatory, but someone will inevitably have more contact with the child and therefore the most impact on the child's safety and risk. in preventive services, I don't know if this has changed, but more often than not, it is the mom of the child, but one caregiver will always have more contact with the child, and that will be the primary caretaker. Oh, I see we're going to talk about program choice again.
Program choice.
So that's how important it is. We're talking so nice, we got to talk about it twice.
You're going to leave knowing so much about program choice. So program choice is really important because it's how services are paid for in preventive services. So we're making sure that we're selecting mandated or non-mandated. So when it says non-mandated, it's services that are being provided designed to prevent future placement. Now, most of the time we're selecting mandated preventive services. That does not mean that the family is mandated to preventive services. It means that the family who's receiving preventive services, we're mandated to provide the care for them. And I hope that makes sense. This trips a lot of people up because it feels like we're saying that they're mandated to the services. That's not what it means. So it says here, provided by a local district or voluntary agency, which is us. We're a provider agency. And, our work really is to make families stronger and keep them together, to prevent care or replacement in care. And we want the kids, we do have some children in trial discharge. We want to make sure that they're home sooner. And always the ultimate goal in any of our services is, again, to make families stronger and keep them together.
This might be a bit repetitive, but just as a note, the program choice is primarily changed by the supervisor. So always consult your supervisor before you take the liberty of changing a program choice.
Yeah, because what you'll see sometimes when we get the referral, it will say, I think it'll just say protective. And so it won't say preventive mandated, it'll say protective. So, that's something that's always typically in a perfect world, which we do not live in, changed by ACS when they make the referral. So if a case has FSU or continued involvement, protective is going to stay on as part of that, but it's always going to have a preventive element.
Good to move on?
Yes.
Oh, there you go. So let's talk about launching a new FASP. So we've thoroughly set the table. We've got our plates, forks, knives, glasses, sex trafficking screening, program choices correct. We've listed all the people we actually want to plan with. Now we're going to launch a new FASP. We can see here, this is, where are we? So you would just simply click this and it will bring up a new FASP over here. You'll see FASP type. We talked about this before. The initial, this very, very blurry line says initial, comprehensive, and if there are subsequent FASPs, they will say reassessment or plan amendment. Launching, synonymous with starting. So you've launched your FASP, meaning that you're now able to begin completing the document. If a FASP is not launched, that just means you haven't started it yet. It means there's one that's going to be coming due, but you haven't clicked launch to get the process started. And this is all still in connections. There are some FASPs that are done offline, but right now we're still talking about FASPs that are completed in connections. Okay, so if a FASP is in process, it means good on you. You've launched it, you're working your way through it. Maybe you've gotten some of it started, maybe you're just got a couple more things to do before you submit it for approval. The wheels are turning. The FASP is pending. This means the FASP is complete and has been submitted for approval. There are a few people who are involved in the approval process. So if your FASP is pending, it doesn't mean you're in the clear just yet. If a FASP is approved, congratulations, you're all squared away with the service plan. Go enjoy yourself. Yes, just I'm just scrolling down my notes here. FASPs need to be approved by the due date, and they need to be approved by ACS. Generally, this is not a problem. but you will have the occasional instance where ACS is delayed with their approving. Things happen, it is what it is. You and your supervisor, this is not the greatest thing, but then you and your supervisor will need to reach out to ACS and be like, ACS, what's going on? Why aren't you approving my FASP? What's the delay? And document that conversation, because when a FASP is late, it reflects on you, my friend. If a FASP is missed, that means it was never launched and now is significantly overdue. If you leave it this way, it'll drop into a template format and you've, congratulations, created a very big headache for yourself. Luckily, the prevention program has enough measures in place that you shouldn't ever be in the missed or template format category. When you meet with your supervisor for supervision, they're going to follow up on some of that administrative stuff. We also have a system called Safe Measures where you can look and see what you have coming due and really plan ahead. It's very, very rare that we encounter a missed or template format as a FASP status. We do very well with our FASP dates. I'm knocking on my desk here, but you can't see that. Always just save yourself the headache and look at your to-dos and connections, and your supervisor can show you how to do this to see what you have coming up. So all FASP components are divided into what's called a FASP tree, and we see that over here, FASP tree. You've launched your FASP, now you see this. If there's an asterisk next to it, all that means is that it must be completed. And as you can see, there is an asterisk next to all of these because you cannot submit the FASP for approval until all of these components are complete. Check FASP detail, one of my favorite features of connections of the FASP. So you're soon going to learn, as you kind of saw on the previous slide, that there are a lot of components to completing the service plans because we do a lot of work with families. Families have a lot of history, some have a lot of services, so this is where we document all of that, and it can be very tricky to stay organized. But the Check FASP detail will really, really help you stay organized. Anytime you click Check FASP detail, this screen will come up. You see this Check FASP detail over here. Anytime you click refresh list, it's only going to show you components that you still have to do. So you don't have to go click through the entire service plan and see what you still have to do. The Check FASP detail feature takes all of the guesswork out for you. So we're gonna kind of go through all of these components now. If you're feeling like you wanna do a quick stretch, run to the bathroom before we dive into this, feel free to pause us, do that, and come back.
Safety. We are always promoting and supporting safety in child welfare. It is our primary function. It's performed throughout the life of the case. The safety assessment that we're documenting, we're making sure that we're documenting it in the FASP. So when is a child safe? We're talking about when there's no immediate or impending danger or serious harm to the child's health or a result of acts of commission or omission, actions or inactions by a parent, caretaker, or parent. A child's caretaker or parent. So when we're talking about safety, there are two formats of safety in the FASP, right? It's either a CPS safety assessment or non-CPS safety assessment. This is why the program choice is so important, because if protective is there, it's going to make sure that the CPS protective safety assessment areas of the FASP are embedded into that FASP. If you have a case where there's no FSU, safety is, managed at that time and at a lower level, it might come up with the non-CPS safety assessment. So that's why those things, setting the table, as Maria had explained before, is super important. And so when we're talking about CPS safety assessment, The focus is on the parent or caretaker's actions or inactions and the dangers that their behaviors pose to one or more of the children in the family. And now the non-CPS safety assessment doesn't mean that these are not safety issues. It just means that it's not falling under the parent or caretaker's actions or inactions, right? It's still affecting the safety of the child, the family, or the community. Sometimes this, most often it's involving a child's behavior that could endanger them or others. All right, so yep, Connections will automatically generate the appropriate assessment for you to complete based on the program choice. So get your glasses, lean in, squint a little, because there are so many CPS safety factors reflected in safety and risk. Now, you're going to think back to safety and risk training if you've gone, and they really highlight there that we're not to throw all the elements of safety on a FASP. We're really to zero in on where they all connect to. Sometimes looking at a previous FASP is helpful to see what was previously selected by ACS. Are we saying that it's a parent or caretakers, a parent or diagnosed medical or mental health status that is impacting the kids? Are we saying that it's alcohol use, domestic violence? We're going to pick the most appropriate thing. And now sometimes they connect, and that doesn't mean that we picked 7 or 8 safety factors. It means that we're going to really think about what the safety factors are right now in this moment that's impacting the children. And, if it all, is connected to one, we're going to do that. And we're going to utilize the comment section to really highlight all the other things that tie it together.
So as Justine said, sometimes clients come to us and it's not that there isn't a safety concern. It's just that the safety concern is not the quote unquote fault of the parent or caregiver. It's not based on action or inaction from that caregiver. Some examples of these situations, of these scenarios might be if a child is suicidal. Yes, that is a risk, but it is not a parent's fault that a child is suicidal. If a caretaker passes away and the family is unable to find alternate forms of caregiving, or if they need help being connected to services, non-CPS safety. And you will have selected CPS safety or non-CPS safety, and when you do the program choice in the setting the table part of the whole process. When a program choice of protective is not selected, a non-CPS safety assessment will be automatically generated. Set your table, my friends. Where am I here? Okay, so let's talk about safety factors. So as we're moving through this training, you're going to see page numbers here, 5-7. All that means is the guide that's linked below in the description of this video. That's where you can find chapter 5, page 7 is where you will find more information about safety factors. So if you're feeling like you have questions that are unanswered, please feel free to refer to that guide. So this is what your screen is going to look like when you're documenting what the safety factors are. All of these are going to correlate with the safety factors Justine was talking about just a few minutes ago. We are only clicking what's relevant for the family at the time of writing this FASP. We are not, if alcohol use was an issue in the past, but parents have gone to treatment, it's not as much of an issue anymore. It's not an issue at all anymore. We're not selecting that. We're trying to have the FASPs illustrate progress. So we're not going to keep harping on old issues in current service plans. As always, whatever you select, you must support with comments. We're not just saying, yep, dad's using drugs, let me move on in the service plan now. No, we must say, like, what is the impact on the children? What is dad's, perhaps we're talking about what the drug of choice is, how it's impacting the children, and any discussions we may have had to reduce the use. Yep, providing evidence. If FSU is involved, a safety factor must be selected. So FSU is court. If a family's safety concerns rise to the level of having the courts involved, we must be selecting a safety factor. Not all families are going to have a safety factor selected, but if FSU, if court is involved, we must have one selected, and only the most relevant ones. Okay, so as you can see, the FASP is broken down into different windows, and the different windows are broken out into tabs. So we just spoke about safety factors, and now we're moving on to the next tab, which is safety decision. The safety decision tab simply quantifies how many safety factors are present. If we select no safety factors, we should be questioning ourselves here about why we are still involved with the family. Safety factors exist but aren't rising to the level of immediate danger or harm, or one or more safety factors. This is kind of prevention territory. If we're having many safety factors, perhaps prevention is not the right fit for this family. So we're in the prevention program really living in like safety decision 2, 1, 2, or 3 territory. And again, you're always going to have comments for what you to support what you have selected. So let's talk about parent caretaker actions. My old saying when I was teaching my case planners how to do a FASP is, if you can read and answer a question, you will be able to do a FASP. So the question that you're being asked here, describe specific actions taken or to be taken by parents, caretakers, or other family members to protect the children from specific dangers identified in the safety factors tab. So if a parent is using alcohol to the degree that it is impacting the safety and well-being of their child, what actions are they taking in the short and the long term to address that safety factor? I will also say the FASP can be a very repetitive document. So don't think that this is the only place where we're going to document what a parent's going to be doing. It's important that these resources that we're talking about are sustainable. If we are talking about something that is going to be no longer an option by the end of the week, if we're saying that if, dad who is drinking to the degree that it's affecting the safety and well-being of his children, yeah, well, he has this brother who he can leave the kids with if he's feeling activated and feel like he's going to relapse, but his brother is moving to Florida next week, that's not a sustainable strength or resource. We want to really figure out with the family, what are the strengths and resources that they can rely on? And that's what we're documenting here. Safety plan. So a safety plan is a set of actions and interventions intended to protect a child or to control a dangerous situation. It must address the factors listed in the safety factors checklist. We're not putting services like therapy in a safety plan. If I am a young person and my parent is abusive, they could go to therapy, but that therapist is not going to protect me if my parent is activated or triggered or in a situation that is going to lead them to abuse me. Therapy is not going to help them in that moment. So what are the immediate things that we can put in place to immediately protect people from danger of serious harm? You develop safety plans with families, not for families. We must incorporate we must involve families at every step of the case planning process. We could impose all the suggestions we think are going to be great, but if it's not going to work for that family, it's irrelevant. You're going to do a lot of this through your SBC work, working with families to identify the outlets and the tools that are going to work for them to keep their families safe.
Safety assessment. So here's where you're going to document the safety plan that's related to the issues. And this is really only selected if things are very serious, right? So here's where we're putting if the intervention might be an emergency shelter, a domestic violence shelter, there's a judicial intervention, order of protection. We're putting that here. And in the comment section, we're sort of adding a little bit more detail, right? Because we know that checking a little box with a sentence doesn't tell the story or the work around there. So that's why we always utilize the comment box.
Okay, now we have made our way through the safety piece, this first line right here. Normally, when we move our way through part of the FASP and we click refresh list, one of whatever we have just completed will disappear. However, if you saw here, ready for FASP submission, this first one, safety, what we just went through, will not go away until that's checked. So it will not be gone if you click refresh list here. Connections is working, it's doing its job. Don't worry if it doesn't go away, you haven't selected that box. That's all that means. So the next portion of the FASP we're going to move into is the family update. This is the real meat and potatoes of the FASP. It's similar to the safety assessment, the safety portion of the FASP. It's also divided into tabs. So we're going to talk about why the case opened, the family background, the case update, and legal activity. I'm going to start with why the case opened.
When we look at that first tab in this section, which is the original reason for case opening, this is where ACS is documenting, what happened to bring the case to, their attention. Sometimes they'll, be very specific. Sometimes they will not. Sometimes they'll include the source of the referral, and sometimes they will not. I always suggest looking at it and making sure that it's relevant. And sometimes the original reason for the case opening with ACS is not why the case was referred to preventive services. So this is an opportunity that, we can add why it's being referred to our program specifically. And something to think about, if ACS is writing something in a FASP, you don't take it out if it's in a narrative form. You'll just hop down in this. This is the only tab that will timestamp you. Once you click on it, it will say the following narrative was entered by, and it will have your name. It will say the date and the time. If you choose not to say anything, that timestamp will still be there, and that's okay. It just means that you've checked, to see the original reason for case opening. That might be more relevant in terms of a special medical program or FTR program, or if it transfers to another preventive agency. And that's where you'll just sort of put there, like the original reason the case is now opening with you.
So family update window, family background. Justine just talked about the original reason for the case opening, and now we're moving on to the family background. So we have our basic information about why this family came to our attention. But now we're going to talk about what about this family is going to impact our planning with them. We might want to talk about what is known about the family if they have previous child welfare involvement. If we've done the genogram, we might want to write some of those findings here. If we're able to explore an extended network with the family, the family's cultural background, how the family's culture might impact your planning on services. Are they a family who really buys into the stigma of mental health treatment? Are they a family that's multi-generational and grandparents care for small children? All of this information is going to come from your genogram and your psychosocial. We also want to include in SBC language, what stage of development is the family in? Are they a beginning couple? Do these parents just meet? Do they have an infant? What stage of development they're in. And if they're in multiple stages, definitely include that as well. Really anything about the family's history or current arrangement that's going to impact our planning and work with them. Case update. So just get myself caught up here. So far we've documented why the family came to our attention, original reason for case opening, family background, any relevant information that's going to impact our planning with them. Now we're moving into the case update. The primary focus of the case update is what has happened since the last service plan. If it's January 2021, the last FASP was, let's say, July 2020. I am not concerned in the case update with anything that happened before July 2020. I'm looking at July 2020 to January 21. What has happened for this family in this time frame? Any changes in the household composition, any services that have been completed. Perhaps you've been working with a family where educational neglect is the primary concern and a child has graduated. You're also going to include here if you had an FTC, an elevated risk conference, a child safety conference, any kind of meeting that you had, you want to include when that was, who was there, and what you discussed. If it is within that time frame between the time of you writing this and the previous service plan that was approved. If you're looking at this and you're in the FTR program, what treatment phase is the family in? Remember that the FASP is a family-focused document. So if Justine and I are both caregivers in a family, we're not just writing about Justine. We're writing about Justine and Maria because they are both caregivers and we're planning with both of them. Anything I'm missing about the case update, Justine?
No, you did an excellent job. This one is super straightforward. Family update, the legal section. Is there a court-related or legal activity? We're going to select yes or no. If the answer is yes, we're going to put the date, if we know it, of the event and the information that we do know, a court type, the legal stuff. I will say sometimes we're confused as workers, like, wow, this family has so much court stuff, I'm not really sure. I would suggest calling or sending an email to the ACS worker. Whenever you send that email to the ACS worker, you're always CCing your supervisor so they could help you follow up if they never ever respond to you. And then you could put that information in and then you're just going to save it.
My favorite part of the FASP. It's so straightforward and easy. All right. Now we see our old friend, check FASP detail. At this point, you can click refresh list and ooh, look at all that stuff you just did. Look at it, look at it. All these options are not going to be crossed out in red. They're going to be gone completely. All of these are also hyperlinks. So if you just click it, it will bring you right to that portion of the FASP.
I'm going to say one thing. If you know that you completed that last section with the family update, the case summary in the background, and it's not disappearing, and you're going to drive yourself nuts, I'm going to tell you right now, go into case summary. If it doesn't have a little check next to it, you just open it back up, you hit space and save again. And sometimes the little check is there and then it will go away.
Connections is a really fun dinosaur system where you have to like know these little tricks here and there. Okay, strengths, needs, risks.
So this is, I mean, it is where you're putting the most current information on our families. It's scales. Sometimes it's going to be pre-filled in from the last FASP. You're always going to check it and update it. You're not going to allow a different worker's assessment to be part of your FASP. You're going to use your own assessment. And it's an ongoing assessment. And, you know, it really, it's going to provide the framework of gathering the key information, and it's very specific questions. You're just going through the scales. It's going to ask you and you're going to check it off. Sometimes there's an opportunity if there's multiple children to select all children fall under, you know, this particular scale, like, are they meeting all their medical needs? Yes. And you could select that for all of them. Sometimes it's going to be for some of the kids. So you're going to need to go in, and it's one of those things where your eyes kind of go in and out, but you're going to select it. And if it's something that's based on age, like for 2 and under, is the child bonding? It's not going to let you select it if it's inappropriate to select. I will say, again, if this doesn't disappear, it means you missed one. And something that happens from the comprehensive to the reassessment FAST sometimes is they're adding a question. So you're like, I did all this is all filled out, nothing's changed. They're adding a question and you need to go in and check that. I will also say a lot of times people feel like they have a hard time selecting the scales for the family. We're so defensive of the families that we work with. We don't always want to say that they have really poor coping skills, you know, and that's, again, like an opportunity to use the comments. So we could talk that like we're working on it, but maybe mom doesn't have those coping skills. And, you know, something that was told to me is you always want to pay attention. And if you're selecting like either everything is outstanding or everything is, you know, really at the highest risk, you need to have a comment to support your selections in the scales. So the family scales are not completed in the initial FASP, and at least one set of them must be completed for the primary caretaker. The FASP has fail-safes. You're not going to be able to submit it if you don't complete it. For the children, every child that's tracked, we're selecting the scales. And when we say tracked, that means that they are under 18 and they're receiving services from us. The individual child scales are completed by a case planner or caseworker. So sometimes as a caseworker who might have a shared FASP with foster care, you're going to be asked to put input into the FASP. That's an example of when you have a caseworker role. If you have a caseworker role working on a FASP, you can never submit it. Case planner has to submit the FASP. When we go to the parent caretaker scales, we're looking at the scales used to evaluate the strengths and the needs of the individuals that are in connections as the caretaker or secondary caretaker. And those are completed with each FASP.
So this is what this is an example of the parent caretaker. It looks very similar for the child, although the questions may be different. The questions will be different. And like Justine said, like it's simply the caretaker was abused and neglected as a child. What are we rating? This is the scale ranging from A to D. If Christy and Thomas both have no history of abuse or neglect, you can simply click all. You would then click comments to support anything that you selected here. It could be as simple as saying parents do not, Miss Christy and Mr. Thomas don't have any history of child abuse or neglect. They have minor illness and physical disability, as Christy is has cerebral palsy. Whatever the case is, we're documenting the evidence that supports what we have selected. Anything to add for this, Justine?
I would just say the comments are your friend and you need to update them. A lot of times they're just left, and you know, I saw one FASP once where it talks about like the grade the child's in, and I'm like, ooh, this is from a long time ago. So you want to make sure you're always updating that.
All right, we are checking our FASP detail again, clicking refresh list. Now we see we've done the family update and we've done all of our scales to rate the family. We're moving and grooving now, team. We're working our way through this. So let's continue. What is risk assessment? So we've moved on to the next portion of the FASP. In child welfare, when we say a family is high risk, it's not just like an expression that we're using. It's based on an assessment that we do within the FASP. Risk assessment is the process of gathering information on significant behaviors and circumstances that contribute to the need for ongoing child welfare intervention. It's based on a set of factors that informs decision-making about the need for services that might reduce the likelihood of future abuse. We'll talk a lot about what that means.
The RAP, the Risk Assessment Profile, is the assessment tool that calculates the likelihood of the child or children being abused or maltreated within the next 2 years. So, you know, this is based directly around our the program choice. And again, I think we have a sample of what it'll look like. So you're going to select, it shows the likelihood based on what we've selected. Right? It's evidence-based tool, and it supports the framework by using the gathered information about the caretaker's households, listing all their potential risk elements in a family. And that's why it's so important that it's accurate, because that information is what's being used to predict the likelihood. So when we see that they're high risk, we need to be really mindful about certain things in order to reduce that risk. We want to structure our decision-making regarding, the need to provide services for those families in order to reduce those risks. And we're always going to document this. And when we see sometimes, and I'll say this, sometimes we might see a family that is going to have a really, high score on the risk assessment profile. And we're like, ooh, this doesn't seem right. This is a family that's ready to close. We might have accidentally selected a scale that is showing a higher risk. So we would never, and I think it actually will pop up and say, well, actually you selected these and that's why it's there. When is it completed? So it's completed in all FASP when we have that protective program choice attached. So again, super important to, set the table and look at certain things before you're launching a FASP, because it will inform the entire FASP that you're responsible for. I think there are certain things around in the initial versus the comprehensive and reassessment. Different scales are asked in those FASPs, and it is a key turning point in a case that could help support decision making.
In case we haven't overstated it enough, any case with the program choice of protective will require you to complete this, because we are assuming if the program choice is protective, it will be a higher risk case. So this is what it looks like. It's very straightforward, but people get tripped up on it for some reason. So these are the set of questions that research has determined that if the answers to these are yes, it contributes to the likelihood of further abuse in the next 2 years. So families who had an indicated CPS report since the last service plan, there was a high correlation between an indicated CPS report and further abuse in the next 2 years. Any child in the family unit, and that's your person list window, currently or was previously in the care of a substitute caregiver. So if you have a young person who is on trial discharge from foster care, you would select yes, or have previously been in foster care. Any child under the age of 1, babies cannot tell us how things are going. We could have all the conversations without the parents present as we want, but they're not going to be able to tell us how things are going. And babies are stressful, no secret. Babies cause stress for families, so it creates a higher risk. Does the caretaker understand the current or potential harm? Are they willing to address those areas of harm? Are they on board with referrals? Are they not? Once you select all of this, you'll click save and it will calculate your risk score. To a lower is a low risk, ranging all the way from 10 or above to a very high risk. So here we see that we are talking about the primary caretaker and the secondary caretaker. We talked about who that will be when we were setting the table. Primary is whoever has more interaction with the child. That can change over time if a caretaker is no longer in the picture, whether through circumstance or if they've passed away. So ensuring that is correct is going to give you a more accurate risk assessment score, or more accurate risk rating. Elevated risks. So a yes to any of these elevated risks is automatically going to generate a very high risk score, meaning it's a very high risk case. Death of a child, if a parent's rights have been terminated, sexual abuse by a caretaker, serious physical abuse, or if a new infant was born with a positive toxicology. We cannot overstate the importance of providing comments if you select any of these. We will never say, yep, there was a death of a child, and have no comments to support that selection. I can't just live there as a yes without comments.
So here in the mapped risk window, we're just reminding that this is based on the scales that we have selected. So I'm glad that we have this, because I think I mentioned it before. Sometimes it will say, you're at this level of risk because of these questions that you've selected. Definitions.
It was a bit repetitive. Just go. Sorry. Fast forward myself a little bit too much here. Family unit, who are we tracking? Primary, who has more responsibility? Secondary, who is there? And it's not always going to be a secondary caretaker, but if there is, it's the person who assumes less responsibility for the child. All right, our good old friend, check FASP detail. And now we see that the risk assessment profile will not go away because we have not selected ready for FASP submission checkbox. So don't worry, Connections is doing its job. You just haven't selected that checkbox because the FASP is not ready for submission yet. Okay, family assessment analysis. We have done a lot of our own assessment of the family at this point. And even though we've involved them, we should have involved them in the whole process. We haven't done a whole lot of documentation about what their input and their opinion is. The family assessment analysis is where that information lives. We also further document the need for our involvement and begin to shape the service plan. In the family assessment analysis, we're really being mindful of what are the root causes of the problems that we're seeing. Not so much the symptoms, but the root cause of the problem. And what are we going to do to address those causes rather than the symptom of the cause?
The family's view. So here, the real purpose of this tab is to put what the family's view is at this time. And it's really important because it might not be the same as your view as the worker, right? And so even if our view's different, our voice is in all areas of the FASP. And here we're really making sure and emphasizing what the family's view of their situation is here.
Behaviors and contributing factors. What are the underlying conditions that warrant child welfare intervention? Is there resistance to going to treatment? Is the family not able to identify what the problem is? This is where we want to use our clinical skills, our assessment skills to look at the root cause of the problem. Why are we still here? We've documented this in a million other areas of the FASP. It's just writing it in this portion as well. Strengths. This tab asks, what's going well for this family? What supports are in place? What are they proud of? In the FASP guide that's linked below, there are a ton of, you're having trouble identifying strengths for a family. The guide below, linked below in the video description, has a lot of really great questions that you can ask a family to try to pull some of those strengths. All families have strengths, every single one, even if it can be hard to identify them. Where we document that. What's going well for this family? What can they rely on? What are their strengths? We're going to check our FASP detail. Our family assessment is all done now, aside from the risk assessment profile. We're almost done, team. Look how much work you've done here. Look at this. Be proud of yourself.
We're going to talk again about program eligibility. And so here, we're selecting why preventive services is in place. Is it because there's a continuing need for, clients at risk of placement? And so whenever someone has preventive services, they're always at risk of placement, right? We are the, put in place to prevent that. But so it's either at risk, we're going to do whether it's usually it's going to be a parent service need or a child service need, depending on the referral. And we're going to have a comment. So here, like, again, Maria mentioned that the FASP is a very repetitive document. We're selecting here basically why there's a continuing need either to, to keep at risk of placement or to prevent replacement. Those are the only ones really you're selecting in preventive. The needs, is it around like the parent need or the child need? And then we're putting a description of those behaviors and circumstances in the comment box.
Always save, we haven't mentioned this yet, but always save your work. It will not automatically save it for you. Okay. So service planning, family assessment service plan, right? So this is where we're planning. The goals in your service plan should always reflect the family team conference. We're never adding goals or tasks that people haven't agreed to, caregivers, people haven't agreed to in the service plan. The service planning always begins with the family and must reflect their input. One of the core values of case planning is nothing about me without me. Transparency is super important. Outcomes evolve from problems and needs identified in your assessment. We're not ever creating outcomes that are irrelevant to the issue at hand. Sometimes if you're looking at a service plan that ACS has already completed, they might write things like SC, BM, BF. That's not the language we use in the prevention program. So you can modify it. That's okay. Don't be afraid of modifying a goal. This is your family. You have ownership over, over this documentation. Just change it to Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so. It's just not, ACS sometimes uses language that we don't use in the prevention program. Goals are retained if we complete the comprehensive and then are completing the reassessment. We'll retain a goal and update about the level of achievement. If there are a bunch of goals in the service plan that are essentially the same, you can discontinue it. We're not saying father will attend alcohol and drug treatment and father will attend substance use. Those are essentially the same thing. You can remove one and just make sure the language is most appropriate. So 4 key guidelines for effective service planning. Starts with the family and must reflect their input. Outcomes evolve from problems and needs identified in the assessment. Outcomes describe desired behaviors or conditions. What's the change? How are we going to know that there is change? Activities are the services, actions, and steps to be taken by family members and service providers to achieve that outcome. Who is going to do what to make the outcome happen? We'll see what this looks like in a minute.
Right, and so this is what's going to look like. This is the outcome and activity index, and and there's going to have, it's going to say who created or modified the outcome or goal. And something really important to be mindful of is we need to have a clearly identified problem or concern, right? So for example, there is an incident of DV in the presence of the child, right? So the outcome,
yeah, we'll go through.
We'll go through each section, right? But this is what it's going to look like. And I think it's important to see this. And then as you click into it, it will pop up so you can modify it. So is this the one where you go through? Okay.
Yeah, so again, we'll reiterate, all of this is informed by the family team conference. Let's talk about a problem or concern. A problem or concern is what has to change, the specific behavior or the circumstance that needs to be addressed. For example, there is a child in the home who has a developmental delay. That's not a problem or concern because it's not going to change. If we have a child in the home who has a developmental delay or another chronic medical condition and the caregiver isn't taking steps to ensure that the child is attending appointments that are crucial to the child's health and well-being, then I'm a little concerned, right? We're never going to cure a chronic illness. We're never going to cure a developmental delay, but there are systems in place to keep children safer. All of this should be discussed at the FTC. We want a clear description of what the behavior is. No services in place. If a caregiver is mentally ill, I'm not concerned. and needs are being met. If a caregiver is mentally ill and the symptoms of that mental illness are putting a child at risk, then the parent is like, nope, not going to therapy, not taking medication, then I'm a little bit concerned. A clear definition, underlying conditions and contributing factors, and what is the impact on the children. We're never picking problems out of thin air to create plans to address problems that were never discussed. If it wasn't spoken about at the FTC, ethically, it should not go into the service plan.
That's why consensus is so important, and the FTC is that opportunity to make sure that the problem or concern that we need to plan around is being discussed. And so, once we have that problem or concern, the thing that we're working on, we want to have a well-written outcome statement, right? So we want it to be clear, concrete, specific, behavioral, observable, realistic, attainable, time limited. Really, what has to happen for us in order to close? And when we think about SBC, I'm going to use the example, that Maria just had, right? So we have, you gave 3 examples, so now I have to pick one. So we have a parent or caretaker whose mental health is impacting their parenting. So the outcome is going to be, right? So that's an individual level issue, is that, mom, Mrs. Smith, is going to use her healthy coping skill plan so that she is not relying on substances and can promote safety, right? Because we can't say mom's going to go to therapy, because if mom never goes to therapy, then how are we ever going to close the case? So the outcome also has to be tied to what's realistic for us, right? A task or a part of mom's plan in order to make sure that she's using healthy skills and keeping her mental health in check can be therapy, but the outcome won't necessarily be therapy because that's a service. And it's really asking us what will be different and how will we know, right?
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about strengths. Strengths and resources are listed in the strengths field and should relate to the specific outcome statement identified on this window. If we're talking about mom's mental health, we're not saying housing is stable. That's not directly related to the problem that we're talking about. Don't randomly list strengths, please. Parent loves child should not be a strength. It's great that the parent loves their child, but this doesn't really tell me anything about how this parent is going to protect their kid. There are plenty of parents who love their children who are not taking the steps needed to ensure their child's safety. The strengths should always be directly related to the problem or concern that we're talking about in this window. Activities. Who will do what and how often? So activities must relate to address the specific problem we were just talking about. So if we're talking about, mom's get well plan, I'm not going to talk about referring the child for early interventions as a caseworker, as a case planner. It's not relevant. I might be doing that in another problem or concern, but not here. We're not talking about that right now. All your activities should be same as the definition of achievement: specific, measurable, realistic, and time limited. You want to use words that you want to avoid jargon. Just be really clear in your writing. Avoid words that imply an imbalance of power. So for example, caseworker will monitor client's progress. We're not babysitters. It's also just not clear. Monitor to you and monitor to me mean 2 completely different things. Use the family's strengths and supports to your advantage here. And have family members identify services that will be helpful for them. Involve your families every step of the way.
Yeah, and something to think about is so what we provide in preventive services is casework counseling, right? So in order for the family to address the problem or concern, they're going to engage in casework counseling at HSVS, and they're going to be provided appropriate referrals. And it's okay if that is what we put in the activities. The same with the worker. What are you going to do, right? Well, you're going to provide casework counseling to, work on that plan with mom and provide appropriate resources, right? So we want it also to be not something that's going to change. If we're too specific about what we're doing and the plan changes next week because it's not working, right? We want to talk about like, what are we doing in an overarching way in our services? Services needed. So I will say this, I think for some reason is an overwhelming part of the FASP for a lot of people. And sometimes it's because ACS puts so many services in this section that might not be relevant. Something that you need to know as someone who works in preventive services is that for any, young person that's under the age of 18 that we're providing services for, we're making sure that we're selecting, that participant and preventive services for children for them. And for all the family members that we're providing services to, we're providing casework counseling. Now, when the service status in preventive services, everything that we're providing is provide purchased. We are being paid to provide these services, and this is how preventive services sort of gets the money from ACS. Everything we do is provide purchased. So when you see casework counseling or preventive services and it says provided direct, you need to change that to update it to provide purchased. Now, and this is a great window because when it says provided direct, that case management, you can't change that as a preventive worker. So if you selected that, it's going to say something like, you can't change anything provided direct, which is not true. You can change things that are provided direct, but not case management services. You can't change that one. So if you see, sometimes it just says other, referred, planned, provided direct, provide purchase. There are a lot of different status things. You need to go through, you need to either discontinue them, update them, and then you need to save it. And what's going to happen, so if you made a referral to mental health, you could select services, mental health, service status referred. And then you see how there's that little box that says complete. You're going to do all that. And once you have everything where it needs to be and you hit complete, there's a fail safe, right? So if you have things that are provide purchased or planned, another screen is going to pop up and it's going to say, are these services still active? So you're just going to go through each one of those, check the box, and don't be afraid to discontinue a service that ACS might have just put in there for the family, because by now you've had discussions with the family, you've had a conference, and you know if that service is on the table or not on the table for them.
So family involvement. Describe the family's input to this service plan. You will have, I hear you. I can hear your concerns and I can't even hear you. Yes, you will have addressed this in other areas of the plan, but it lives here too. There was an FTC. Please, please, please include all that information here. Where was it? When was it? What was the date? Who was there? All that good stuff. What was the family's input to this plan?
Submitting the FASP. So by now you're going to go to that check detail, you're going to hit refresh list, and it's going to have nothing there. And you're going to feel so great. And so you're going to have these options to either submit for approval or submit for review. In preventive services, we always submit for review. So we're sending the FASP to our supervisor who has the opportunity to look at it, make sure that everything that should be there is there, anything that shouldn't be there isn't. And they could add comments and then they send it back to you. Each supervisor works a little bit differently. It will always show up in your to-dos. Some will send an email and say, I have sent you back the FASP, things like that. You will get those corrections. It'll show up in red. I wish it was a different color. Red always feels a little icky, but don't take it personal. It's just connections. It will tell you what you need to add or change. And sometimes it might feel really minor, but the supervisor is sending it back to you so that you know what needs to be changed for the next FASP. It's meant to be an empowering move, not a punitive move, right? And then once you then do all those things that your supervisor has asked you to do, and you've updated the FASP, you could then hit submit for approval. And then, yeah, and then usually it will go to the director who will submit it. Now, whenever we see our FASP was rejected, there's a tiny part of us that feels awful. Don't, right? Sometimes it happens to all of us, and that's okay. The most common reasons that a FASP is rejected is that you've selected a comment for a family member that says there's serious mental health concerns, and then you don't say what they are. Or the condition of the home is deplorable, but you're not saying anything about that. So we want to, again, make sure that there's always a comment for certain scales. The outcomes, you have 3 outcomes talking about, you know, mom needs a plan for her emotional well-being, her mental health, her coping skills. Think Lord of the Rings. You want one plan to rule them all if they're that similar, right? So you're going to, you know, rewrite it so that it's one thing. Or it's not a safety issue. You have a FAST goal that says you're going to request school records. Just request them. You don't need to make it a FAST goal, right? Some things that we do are tasks, right? And it doesn't need to be a goal for services. Another reason a FASP is rejected is that there are incorrect services selected. So going back to that, that service part where we're always making sure that it's provide purchased, we're making sure that casework, counseling, and preventive services are selected. So if I as a director see nothing as provide purchased, so now we're not getting paid for any of the work that we're doing, or I don't see any preventive services, and I just see a whole bunch of things that ACS put in there, the FASP will be rejected, and then you'll update that portion. Also, sometimes services are added that are inappropriate or irrelevant to a family. And that could mean, you know, it's saying that they need substance use counseling when, you know, substance use is not an issue that this family is impacted with. Going back to what Maria said before, sometimes things from historic, you know, we've had a case for 5 years because so many things have happened, but that doesn't mean the things that happened 5 years ago are still relevant, and we shouldn't be holding the family to that. We want everything in the FAST to be about this family today. We don't want it to be about this family 5 years ago. So those are the most common reasons a FASP is rejected, and you will always be notified why and what needs to happen. And that's on our end. Sometimes ACS will reject a FASP. And finding that out is sometimes a little bit more difficult. You'll be able to see in your to-dos that the FASP was rejected. You'll be able to Beyonce it, click on the box to the left, and then you're going to be able to hit detail, and it will usually say what's missing or what's needed. Most common reasons that ACS will reject your FASP is that you do not have a safety factor selected and a new incident has occurred, or there is FSU involved. Or sometimes they will want you to do something and want you to document it. And this might mean that you need to have a conversation with them. Don't be afraid to call them up and say, hey, you rejected my FASP. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? But those are the most common reasons that the agency or ACS will reject your FASP.
All right, team. We did it. Again, there's a really thorough, robust guide linked below in the video description. I encourage you to use that if it feels like something that works for you. At the agency, we also do live Zoom FASP trainings every month. So if you feel like coming to one of our trainings would also be helpful to talk to your supervisor, they're very easy to register for. But thank you if you've made it this far. God bless. And have a good one. Thanks.